Okay. Where's my agenda? I have so many papers now. Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. Let's call the Parks, Rec, and Greenway Board meeting on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. Thank you. Let's open it at 9:06 a.m. We are missing Christina Colt, but we do have a quorum. John, our council liaison, will be here momentarily, but we're going to get started without him. We do not have any board members participating remotely. And so the next item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I hear a motion to that effect? Do I hear a second? All in favor? All right. Next is the previous minutes. Do I hear a motion to adopt the previous minutes as presented if there are no changes? Second? Thank you. All in favor? Fabulous. All right, now we get to the public comment period, and we have a full audience this morning. So just as a reminder, each speaker who has signed in previous to the meeting has 3 minutes to address the board. I also remind you that if 3 minutes is insufficient for your thing, that it is always an option to submit your comments in advance in writing, and those will get distributed to the board members. So I know that people have had a lot to say, and so that is also an option to get your thoughts out. All right, so Austin, if you want to.
Yes. First up is Lauren Thomas, 3025 Groves Edge Lane.
State law says if it's not in writing, the transfer is void. The PR&G was told last month that they just have to assume the Marvin Creek HOA board had a majority vote from residents when the village accepted the easement, but that's not what the law says. Should I start over? I will. The PR&G committee needs adequate knowledge of all relevant laws in order to make recommendations to Village Council on responsible trail development. Number one, you need to know how the North Carolina Planned Community Act impacts your ability to gain new public trail easements in private neighborhoods. Marvin Creek Homeowners Association and other neighborhood associations in the village are subject to the state law. This law requires a minimum threshold of at least 80% of resident approval in writing for voluntary transfers of shared common spaces and allows neighborhood CCRs to have higher thresholds. The state law says if it's not in writing, the transfer is void. The PR&G was told last month that they just have to assume the Marvin Creek HOA board had a majority vote from residents when the village accepted this easement, but that's not what the law states. Did you know this law last month when you were asked to take a vote? No, you did not. Will the village be able to gain this from Preserve residents for an easement extension for the connector trail reroute? I'd like to know. Number two, you need to know what the village's local ordinances say about daily penalties for floodplain violations. The ordinance seems to give some flexibility if a developer's mistake is corrected within 3 days. But beyond that, the village zoning administrator has the authority to fine a developer up to $500 per day if repeatedly warned for the same offense. Number three, you need to know the perspective of the landowners. Last month's PR&G presentation message of "we stopped work after 2 days" does not jive with what the reality of our residents know and witnessed from our backyards. Trail work did not start on January 2nd. We have evidence it started on December 28th. Trail work did not end promptly after 2 days. It continued for 4 weeks. The village attorney confirmed this in an email to a Marvin Creek resident, stating trail development activity ceased in late January. Were you presented with that information last month when you were asked to take a vote? No, you were not. You were misinformed. As the PR&G committee, you can't possibly make recommendations for responsible trail development to the village council when you don't have correct information. This new information should give you more clarity to make a wise decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up is Tori Komisky, 312 Painted Turtle Court.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tori Komisky. I live at 312 Painted Turtle Court. I gave you all a few handouts as well. First, I want to support what Ms. Thomas just shared as far as what the experience has been of the actual residents in Marvin Creek. We have photo evidence of this. We have email evidence, lots of paper trail behind this as well. In addition, one of the things that was not shared on the timeline last month was on January 3rd. It was shared with you all that somebody had notified our village planner that some flyers had been put up with FEMA regulations around the trail. That person was Ms. Castellucci. She sent an email to Hunter Nestor on January the 3rd titled, "Someone isn't a fan of the trail. Saw these stapled to all the trees along the edge of my property, end of Saddle Ave and adjacent to the new trail work near Painted Turtle. Just a heads up, Jen." In addition, there's been a lot of claims that we need this connectivity. Marvin Creek can't possibly reach the Preserve or Village Hall or Marvin Elementary School without adding this new connector trail. I've added maps onto your desks there that show very easily there is sidewalk, pedestrian sidewalk, as well as existing trails that get from this juncture to Marvin Elementary School to the Preserve to right here. There's a trail that exits off of Pompous Way that comes right here. No one needs to go on this dangerous section that's not complete yet to get to Village Hall. It's a very safe, pedestrian, existing format. We do not need to be encroaching on this private property, this floodway, the privacy and safety of the homeowners that are here, their properties, and us as humans. It's not safe in this location. Additionally, last month in the presentation, a picture was presented that included a gentleman standing up on Saddle Avenue as though it's some high ground. And what I can share with you is that I have video from that day where that location is completely covered in water. There's no indication that that was a safe place. I've included in your packets there a picture of the culvert that goes under Saddle Avenue that was completely overtopped by the floods. It's not the first time it's happened. It will not be the last time it's happened. There's too much here to address in 3 minutes. I please ask that you please recommend that the village stop encroaching on private property, floodways, and the privacy and safety of Marvin Creek and Preserve homeowners' property and families. Please leave the floodway untouched for the benefit of the environment, wildlife, and all Marvin residents. This unnecessary connector trail is not some prize to be won. These are real people, your neighbors, that are being impacted. Please vote to recommend the return of the Marvin Creek Trail easement so that our community can move on and focus on healing. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one else has signed up.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comments. We will get back to these in a moment. All right, so next item up is Parks and Recreation updates. That would be Tyler. How did Marvin Day go?
So, really good Marvin Day. Good turnout. I think a lot of families showed up and had a lot of fun, especially in the early hours. We had the Breakfast Club came out, pretty good attendance there to see them play. Really good food trucks. They did well, had business, really good. Brewery was there, iced coffee, stuff like that. We had Seth from Union County Parks and Rec come out and do a disc golf clinic at 4:30 and 5:30, and that was a hit. A lot of people over there doing that with them, kind of learning. A lot of people went to the clinic and then went and played around there at the park, so that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, I think everyone that showed up to Marvin Day had a really good time. I think it was a good thing. Coming up on June 1st, we have our 5K. You'll be able to find the registration link coming up on our Instagram posts and in the newsletters and stuff like that. It's being spread around town. There's flyers around town at different businesses with QR codes to sign up. So if you see that in a local business, be sure to scan that. But yeah, that'll be at Marvin Elementary School. And the 5K will be at 9 a.m. and the Family Fun Run will be at 10 a.m. And we'll also have a health fair going in the parking lot of the elementary school. We'll have the Bloodmobile, Publix, a couple local vendors will be there. So it'll be a good day to come hang out, and we'll have a coffee truck there. So it'll be a cool little health fair. We'll get something up coming soon where you can pre-register to donate blood as well. Following that, in July, on July 12th, that weekend, we will have a stargazing event. We've partnered with a really cool local volunteer from NASA, and he will be taking on some people out there at Eford Park that Friday night, and that'll be a cool chance to learn about space, and he'll have telescopes out there, and it'll just be a really cool, fun event. And you'll see a sign up for that coming out probably in June. That'll be something you have to register for because there will be limited space available. And a little bit down the road, we are setting a date of September 21st for a cornhole tournament out at Eford Park. This is just something that's kind of putting on everybody's radar, but that'll come out a little later in the summer. But that is going to happen that Saturday. Hours and fees and everything are to be determined, but you'll see some more information on that online as the summer goes. Any questions on events coming up?
I failed to write it down. Remind me again, the stargazing event is what night?
It's July 12th, that Friday night. We have the whole weekend booked with our guide just in case the conditions aren't right.
Oh, okay, so we can
So we
shift
could
it
say if it's not
cloudy.
right Friday, we can do it Saturday. And if it's not good, we can try it Sunday. But
Awesome.
ideally, it's going to be clear skies and good to see, because I think that's going to
Excellent.
be a lot of fun.
All right, awesome. Anybody else have questions for Tyler?
I can, something. So,
Go ahead.
it's definitely something I can do. I can bring back a little more detailed of like estimated numbers of attendance and everything. A few more details. I can definitely bring that to our next meeting.
Yeah, just curious because you had a lot of events. I didn't know if there was like a concentration of a lot of folks in one time, or did it go out throughout the day?
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely put something together like that for y'all.
Yeah, so we have a separate committee
Okay,
for
I wasn't
it,
sure if
so
it was outside of this.
we'll have our first debriefing after this meeting on that,
Okay.
and so
From
we'll,
there comes the, okay.
yeah, and then after that, we can collect more information and present more specifics. All right, awesome. All right, so other than the unfinished business looking ahead, are there any updates on Trails and Greenways from your
Well,
side?
I have asked Hunter to tag along. He'll be coming to meetings quarterly throughout the year from now on to give some more updates on the Trails and Greenways. Hunter, if you have anything that's not unfinished business?
The only update is the Marvin Loop project. The village did, how am I trying to say this? Basically, over the last year, we have been negotiating terms with our engineer that was selected. The firm that was selected was Dewberry. We finally got their rates approved, our contract approved, all that stuff for the Marvin Loop project. This is a federally administered grant, so there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and that's what's taken basically the last year to get to this point. But the contract with Dewberry has been executed. It's been submitted to DOT. We are basically, everything's been authorized for them to begin the preliminary engineering and environmental work for the extension of the Marvin Loop, which goes from the preserve paved portion all the way to Saddle Avenue. So those plans will be being worked on by by Dewberry over the next probably 9 to 12 months. with and right-of-way scheduled probably, right-of-way acquisition / easement acquisition scheduled for about this time next year, maybe starting in the winter, depending on the percentage of plans done, and once they get reviewed by NCDOT, then potentially construction starting next fall, fall of '25. So just want to give you guys that update, but other than that, the only other update we can kind of discuss about in unfinished business.
Okay, so this, I would say, this is the same thing you just handed me, Christina, this is Dewberry, or is this what Hunter was just talking about, or is this something different?
No, what I just handed you was something completely different. Actually,
Completely different, okay.
our,
Same company, different.
yes. Village
topic.
Council has not seen what you have in front of you
Oh, okay.
yet. So, and I don't know how many copies I passed out, but I just wanted to let you all know in terms of greenways and trails. If you've heard in the past, we have recommended in the council's CIP for next year a feasibility study on all greenways and trails. If you look at the back of this, this is your Greenway Master Plan, and it basically shows all the proposed spine and connector trails that are a part of the master plan, and part of the proposal in front of you is for Dewberry to look at the feasibility of construction of those trails with, within streams, wetlands, the endangered species. So they're basically going to do an overlay and give us a feasibility report on how likely it is for us to build certain trails that are in the greenways. I'm sorry, in the Greenway Master Plan.
Okay,
So again, council has not seen this yet, but this is something that we have brought forth to make sure that we're kind of looking at some of these environmental features in our community. So just so you all know, this is something we've been working on the last couple of weeks.
okay, awesome, fantastic.
Thanks.
All right, so that's a feasibility study, and then, Hunter, what you were talking about, which trail was that related to? Like-
It's the Marvin Loop, sorry. It's, I want to say on the Greenway Master Plan, it's S1A or A&B. It's weird how they broke those two out, but essentially it's an asphalt, it's an 8-foot, or yeah, 8-foot wide asphalt paved trail from the extension of the one here that's outside of the preserve, coming this way up by Village Hall, down Newtown, down Marvin Road to Saddle.
Got it,
And so there's one existing portion completed, and that's the preserve portion on Marvin Road.
right,
The Marvin Grove, the ZEPSA project rezoning that occurred last year, part of their conditions of their approval is that they will either construct their portion to meet the design from our engineer, and/or they will pay their portion.
okay.
So that's another segment that will be completed, but other than that, it will be a fully new build.
Okay, and the timeline on that is,
If everything goes right.
what?
I said if everything goes right, construction would probably be slated for fall of '25.
Okay.
So,
All right. Awesome. Okay. All right, moving on to unfinished business, discussion of the Marvin Creek Connector Trail. Tyler, I'm going to give you the con for this one.
I've also tagged Hunter in for this as well. I also tagged Hunter
Oh, yeah.
for this as well.
Of course.
If you want to talk about the printout.
yeah, so it's my understanding that, one, I guess that if PR&G is not aware, at the April council meeting, council came to me prior, was asking if there was any alternatives to, any existing easements, other alternatives of rerouting, of trying to connect the trail, connect the preserve trail to Marvin Creek. There were roughly 2 options. One being tying into the existing sewer easement, which is on Jen's property, and cutting across. Or the other one is the one that's sitting in front of you guys, which once again, this is a very high-level conceptual thing. But it would be to cross at a lower portion of the creek and come up. And once again, this is still preliminary and conceptual. This option would, per the terms of floodplain management, not require a no-rise because it is out of the area of delineated study. We'd still have to get a floodplain development permit through the village But other than that, there would have to not necessarily be any engineering done for the bridge. Not saying that this is the best option, I'm just providing you guys with the options. But that is what is presented in front of you. Roughly what this is based off of looking at plats, and Tyler and I went out there about 3-4 weeks ago with Scott, the trail builder, looking at plats and using some measurement tools off GIS. Off the preserved property to the floodway line is roughly about 20 to 25 feet. And this would require a new easement or a relocated easement from the preserve HOA. Staff has reached out to them and arranged a meeting just to kind of discuss some options. But basically what council directed staff to do is find further information, see what options are available, discuss this with the preserve HOA as well as PR&G, and just get, you know, as much information and get a recommendation for council to consider moving forward. So at this time, I think we have an updated trail quote. We have a tentative meeting scheduled with the HOA of the preserve. If all of this moves forward, if we get the easement and council, if PR&G recommends and council decides to move forward with this project, the village would then have the easement staked. We'd also have the floodplain and the floodway staked to kind of see where the direct encroachment is to make sure we're not encroaching into the floodway. But like I said, any encroachment into the floodplain itself can be permitted through a floodplain development permit, through myself, through the village, and but it does not require any type of no-rise engineering certificate for floodway encroachment.
Okay, so just to recap, to make sure I and everyone else is understanding, because we have some visual aids here. The plat map here that you guys received, this is sort of a loose diagram of the easement on Marvin Creek HOA property. That's their plat. That was transferred to the Village of Marvin. And then, correct? That's what I'm looking at there. And then the map without the floodplain indicated, so the one that doesn't have all the blue and everything, is the more or less, I mean, obviously this is schematic with highlighters, is more or less the current, or the proposed trail that we were operating on up until this point. So it shows the connection to Painted Turtle, winds down adjacent to the sewer easement, and then crosses the creek into the preserve, which is marked in pink. And it's the, in addition to the concerns of the residents for whom this trail would go behind, it's the bridge crossing the creek at that location where it would cross floodway that has been the concern environmentally, among other things. So the proposal with the blue floodway marked on it is changing the route of the trail so that instead of crossing the creek at the location where it would go over the floodway, it extends the trail long enough that we can curve around the end of the floodway study, which attached to the agenda, there was an email thread where we conferred with the FEMA our regional representative, Terry Fox, who said that it would be acceptable to go around the end of that study. That is the end of the special flood hazard area, where that hard line is marked. So this is a different option, which, as Hunter was just saying, allows us to avoid the engineering study for putting the bridge in, which reduces the potential cost of the trail. It extends the length of the trail So where we had an 800 linear feet of trail previously, it becomes approximately 1,200 linear feet, according to the Trail Builders quote. And where the actual work was estimated previously at about $18,000, the new price tag here is estimated at $27,750. So an increase in length and in cost. Now, this trail builder quote is just for the installation. It does not include the surveying and staking and so on and so forth. Correct?
The village has an agreement with, I think it's Arco Surveying. There was a scope, there was like 5 items in a scope that the council originally approved, I think it was like last fall, but did include staking of this trail and easement preparation document. So that's already kind of been, the funding's already been approved and allocated. We just
Okay.
haven't used it.
Okay.
Unless. Oh, but that's.
That is so that is the same, that pink line there is the same as the orange, with the exception that it doesn't hang a right and go across the creek at that point, and then you've got the black dotted line that comes. Yes, the pink part and the orange part, I believe, are intended to represent the same trail. Yes, the dot, dot, dot is where we are exploring that change in route to avoid the issues of crossing a floodway and potentially having an impact there. There still has to be a bridge, in fact, yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, like I said, this is very conceptual. It's hand-drawn until basically it's just trying to provide an approximate location, just a visual of where this tentative route would go. If it's recommended to move forward with the project, that's where we'd have it surveyed and actually flagged out for the exact location. And the last thing I'll mention is that this quote cost does not include the wetland delineation study, but that is what I believe Christina handed out to you earlier from Dewberry. It's that agreement or project scope. I mean, let her kind of.
It's actually not. What I handed out earlier is wetland delineation just on the Village Hall Park and a feasibility study of the Greenway Master Plan overlay.
Yes.
We would have to have a separate contract with Dewberry for or another engineer for the wetland delineation for that particular project.
Yes, I feel like there was a number presented to council in like late
There-
February or March or something.
There was a number, don't quote me on this, I want to say it was around $40,000 for the hydraulic study and the wetlands delineation. I don't remember exactly the amount of the wetlands. I want to say maybe 10,000-ish.
Okay.
So I would just plan in your mind conceptually 10,000 for a wetland delineation for that particular trail.
Yeah, because
And I could be off on the numbers.
40,000 included the bridge engineering and the surveying and a whole
Yes.
bunch of stuff, and some of that money was already allocated, like the surveying, but some of it wasn't, and
Yes, and
that's
I could be off on the numbers slightly. I don't have the contract in front of me, but the wetland delineation would still be needed for that particular area, and that's not something that is mentioned in any of the costs that we've given you.
Okay. Okay, so to reiterate, the quote that we have in front of us for $27,750 is for installation only. There would also need to be surveying done, which is sort of already baked into Village Hall's budget due to previous, efforts. And then we would also need the wetland study, which we won't quote Christina on that, but somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10,000 is approximate. So that gives everybody an idea of at least what the expense would be for pursuing this trail, and gives us an option for avoiding at least the engineering cost part of it in exchange for a little bit of extra length. So going forward, I believe that, well, all right, so this gives everyone an overview of where we're at, and I know that council would appreciate a recommendation from this board on, what to do with this easement, however, or not this easement, it's sort of one of the key things, but what to do with this trail. At this point, I feel like that determination might be a little bit premature, given that several legal issues with regard to the easement transfer have been discussed. So, well, not discussed here, but have been brought up. My understanding from communication is that there are letters going back between HOA attorney and resident attorneys with regard to the viability of the easement transfer. And so the previous statements that this board really can't consider the validity of the transfer from the HOA to the village is directed to the fact that we are not attorneys. So, or even those of us who have been attorneys in the past are not qualified to opine on all of this. So my understanding is that in particular, there is a consideration of, in the CC&R documents that the HOA has, that it prohibits the dedication, and I put that word in quotes because that is the word in the CC&Rs, of common area to public use. So it is now a discussion amongst the attorneys and those as to what the implication of the word dedicated means. Does that mean an easement? Does that mean a transfer of land outright? How does that apply to the sewer easement that's on that location? So on and so forth. So that is not something that we can discuss and come to a conclusion on because none of us are qualified. And it is my understanding also that village council at this time this came up between council meetings, and so I don't even think council has not had an opportunity to address this.
Yeah, and I think in general, from a council standpoint, we've kind of put a hold on the project. Partially because of some of the, what you mentioned from a litigation standpoint, but then also we're still gathering some of the facts of what the full costs will be and so forth. So,
Right.
I don't know that we're looking for any specific recommendation from you at this time.
At this time.
As we continue to kind of work some of those things out.
Yeah, I think before some of this other information came to light, we were thinking that we would be able to make a decision, when I attended the last council meeting, some of the council members were interested in having a more definitive statement than we issued last time. But I don't think that given some of the, the consideration of the legal issue. So the only extent to which, so just want to clarify my previous stance with regard to we can't assess whether or not the HOA transferred the easement validly is really directed to the fact that that is not our area of expertise and we can't make a determination on that. If we are told it was transferred to us legally, then that's what we will work on. But given that there is a question at this point about, obviously none of us would want to commit resources to something and not know what the outcome would be.
Yeah, and I will clarify that we, as the village, were copied in on a letter from the HOA attorney saying that, it was conveyed properly and so
Right,
forth.
exactly.
So
And
that we're just with caution and so forth, we're
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
letting things play out.
And that letter, I believe, is what I was relying on when I gave the timeline.
Yeah.
And was indicating that, so far as us as a body, relying on the opinions of people who are better suited to make them is just about all we can do, with the only thought of, if that turned out not to be the case, like how likely do we think it is that, it would be legal or not legal or whatever. Everybody has to sort of internalize that, but since none of us are the relevant parties to that, and none of us are attorneys or in consultation with the attorneys, it's a very difficult thing for us to evaluate. So, given that issue, and also the fact that we still need additional information about the reroute, whether or not the preserve would be willing to adjust the entry point to the preserve's trail, and the additional information on costs of the wetland study. At this point, I think that our best move is to defer any specific recommendation on all of this, and let everybody sort of percolate on the information that has been presented here and by the public, and take all factors into consideration while we wait to get more information. So, do you need a motion to that effect, Austin? Yes, absolutely.
So, not specific just to this piece, but I think. the
Absolutely,
discussion
two of them in
that came-
general.
Yeah, that came up last week or last month was around
Yeah.
overall accessibility to greenways, right? And I think maybe as a whole, not specific to this particular project, but any, as a board, do we need to come up with a direction around, as we build new greenways, as we have existing, do folks have accessibility, walkable accessibility, reasonable accessibility to the different greenways that we have in our community? And I think, I mean, again, not just unique to here, we have a very large trail system in Tullamore. It used to have a parking lot, we removed the parking lot, and so therefore, the only folks who can access it, you have to be, within reasonable
Walking distance
So
of,
I think as a whole, as we continue to invest in greenways, we need to decide, are we building them for neighborhoods, or are we building them for the community to, I guess, reasonably access, within a reasonable distance? So, again, and that kind of came back to the discussion for the Marvin Creek connector, is that, there are neighborhoods, hundreds of homes within a half-mile walking distance to that connector. So, again, I don't know where that comes up into a future piece, but that's why I think there was the discussion to keep this on the table.
yeah, no, I think that's an important consideration. I think that, if the, concrete trail or asphalt or whatever it's actually going to be that Hunter was talking about that goes around here, eventually connects, we will ultimately at some point have an exterior connectivity, and then we're also missing the piece from Marvin Elementary down to here. So there is potential for connectivity around the perimeter, but the important piece of this one is that it is an interior trail. And, another consideration is that, yes, it may put more, I mean, if it provides accessibility, then presumably people are using it, which is to the benefit of the people using it. It may also have the impact of reducing some of the foot traffic within the adjacent communities if people stay on the trail rather than going into the actual communities. So there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of different ways it can be considered, but I agree with you, because not all of the communities have access to the trail systems. Some don't have their own trails within their community. Because it is always an option for us to, I mean, if we felt that, people of this community just wanted to be a whole bunch of isolated little enclaves, we could do nothing. I mean, that is an option. But based on the 2019, I think it was 2018, 2019, 5 years ago, which is still our mandate with regard to the survey, where it seemed that a good number of the residents valued the connectivity and the greenways. And so that's sort of our guiding principle until a time when we get other information. So, yes, I think your point about providing access to a variety of the communities is an excellent one that we'll need to keep in mind. Do you have any thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, I do.
You got a lot of thoughts. Any thoughts you want to share?
I'm not sure about that. I think, one, your point's good about accessibility and parking, something we've discussed in the past. I'm just
Bob,
gonna-
they can't hear you over there.
No, it's probably good. No, I'm not feeling really good right now. No, I really don't have much to say on it.
Okay,
I really, not at this time.
okay. Jen, do you have any comments at this time? Okay, so make sure everybody gets an opportunity. All right, so Austin, do we need a motion, or do we just not
That
opine?
is up to you. One thing I'll note, we are in the early stages of another survey, so we're
Oh,
currently
cool.
working on that. As far as a motion goes for this, that's up to you. If the board can decline to make a recommendation this time, and that'd be the end of it, or if you want to formally make a motion to state that the board is not willing to make a recommendation at this time, you can do that as well.
I think we can just decline to make a recommendation at this time. We need more information. All right.
I'd like to ask Austin. Austin, did you say we're doing another survey?
We are a resident has volunteered their time to work on a new survey for us. So we've had one initial meeting with them, and we've got another one on our calendar right now. So it's a slow process right now, but we are in the early stages.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. Is it going to be similar to the survey 5 years ago in terms of direction, what people, community people in Marvin Creek are looking for in terms of what Marvin's going to look like in the future? A lot's changed in the last 5 years. We've been talking about village districts. We've been talking about extension of trails. We've got a new community. There's been transition, a lot of new members in our community. So I'd love to see us do another comprehensive survey.
That is the intention. We haven't written questions yet. The resident is actually working on those questions for us based on that initial meeting. We should see those in the next few weeks, and then we'll go from there and refine, and then we'll talk about distribution methods. The intention right now is to do what we did in 2019, where each home has a unique code or a QR code or a code to put in, so there's one response per household. That seemed to work very well last time, so we are looking to do that again. And as we get further along in this process, I definitely don't mind updating you all on how that's going.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because that is sort of the only thing that we can really refer back to is sort of the larger community's input.
I do expect this will be multiple months from now before we
Of
actually
course,
have
of
any
course.
sort of thing to really report as far as results go.
Oh, absolutely,
We
these
don't have
things
really
take
a
time.
timeline yet.
But knowing that another one is being generated is excellent information. Okay, fantastic. All right, so we're going to decline to make a recommendation at this time while we gather more information, and I know John will take that to council, and they will understand. Okay, so moving on, Christina, if you would give us a little bit of an update on the stream rehabilitation assistance grants.
Yes, so probably about 4 months ago, staff worked diligently to put together a stream rehabilitation assistance grant application. We identified 4 primary sites, 6 Mile Creek, 6 Mile Tributary, Marvin Branch, and the McBride Branch. We did identify the priority sites being the 6 Mile Tributary and the Marvin Branch. There were several affected neighborhoods in all of those areas, being Marvin Creek, The Preserve, Firethorn, Canterfield, Wyndham Hall, Bridle Path, Elysian Fields, and Marvin Estates. We did work with several members from HOA representatives, and our staff went out and took photos to identify natural blockages that resulted from beavers, storm debris that has just kind of flown down and clogged areas up. So there were approximately $36 million of available funding for the state. The grant application we submitted was $17 million. Now, we know we're not going to get any fraction of that, but our repairs that we submitted were for vegetative debris removal, artificial debris removal, in-stream sediment removal, which was only a small percentage, and a small percentage of stream bank stabilization and stream restoration in the limited capacity that we identified we may need it. Necessary engineering, administration, and permitting allowances were included in those price estimates. If awarded, we would have to work with permission and assistance from the affected and budding property owners through necessary permits with the village and the state. And basically, we're just trying to do what we can to remediate some of the flooding issues that people are seeing. If we get this grant, we'll have to work through that process, and just want to let you all know that it is something we're working on. Since that grant application was made, we've identified other areas, Providence Estates area, Oak Brook, somewhere in that area. We've had some residents call in about similar issues, so we'll continue to apply for these funds as more funds become available. We should find out on May 22nd if we were awarded, and we can let you all know at your next meeting.
All right, awesome. So now, if we do get any of these funds, who does, I mean, we baked in some estimates for the appropriate permitting and studies and so on and so forth. Who actually does the
work.
arranging? Yeah.
So
and
we
the work?
would hire an engineering firm to go through the complete administration of it, and they would hire some type of contractor to do the work. We would have to bid it out.
So, excuse me. So Village Hall would be overseeing the
Yes.
work as opposed to HOAs or individual
Yes.
affected property owners? Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. All right, so don't go anywhere. Does anybody have any questions about that? So I think that if we get any of this money, that would be an important way to alleviate a lot of the flooding issues that we're seeing. So then the second thing, following up on, was your experience at, over here by.
Joe Carlo.
Yeah, the Joe Carr Loop, where, what's it called? Marvin Elementary School, where it sort of did, where the asphalt trail sort of disappears into the trees. We are oh, good, more paperwork. We are underwater over there. Is it still underwater? I haven't been over there.
No, probably after this rain at some point.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We did just have another good washout. So, so that area has been ponding, as well as an area at the very other end of that loop, over near the one of the Marvin Creek development entrances, is. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, take one, pass it on. So, being responsive to your concern, Bob, that, and thank you for bringing that to our attention, that we were having a ponding issue there. I think that Christina had received other complaints as well, and so in response to that.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the Marvin Loop, basically ponding out primarily over by the school, was been a recurring. Yeah, it's been a recurring issue over the last several years. We've actually gone out and tried to remediate several things ourselves. We've re-ditched that area. It seemed to work for a little while. We've actually went out and pumped water out. We've done an array of different things. It seems to work temporarily, but there's some overarching problem that's causing all of that water to puddle there. In addition to that, we've also, one of our staff members, our Public Works Director, Davey Broom, had went out probably about a month ago and identified another area closer on the Joe Carr side that's doing the same thing. We have a couple of repairs that we were trying to get fixed on that loop. If you go out, there's several kind of gaps and cracks. We were just going to come in and crack seal it, but there's little areas that we have a little bit of a variation issue that we wanted to go and shave down. But ultimately, the ponding at the school continues to happen, and we want to get that addressed and resolved before we go in and make those repairs. I think at this point, Council is highly considering redoing that entire trail, resurfacing it. They've asked us to get quotes on concrete and asphalt, but we want to make sure that the flooding issues have been resolved, because we're just going to go back and do the same thing in 10 years if we don't. So the study that's in front of you from AMT, this is our contract engineers that we use for pretty much all of our day-to-day operations. They're going to go out and do an array of different studies on those two particular areas. You can see kind of the scope of work with the desktop analysis, the field investigation, those hydro studies, and then the stormwater assessment of all the stormwater that is kind of coming in from the Marvin Creek subdivision and those other areas, and where that water is puddling. And then they're going to give us some recommendations on what they would recommend to resolve the flooding issues. So this is just for the study. It does not include any type of resolution to the problem. It's just for them to tell us what's wrong, and then we can go from there. So hopefully we'll have an answer finally as to what's causing it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, is it a drainage issue? Is it broken irrigation pipes? Is it,
And
because I know the one on the north side is sort of a newer problem than the one here by the school.
yes, it is, yeah. And we've had with the information gathering that we did with the stream restoration grant, we had a lot of feedback going back and forth. We actually identified a broken pipe that was DOT on Joe Carr. We've gotten in contact with them. They're supposed to be fixing it, but we're just identifying little things here or there, and that's probably going to continue to happen. So we'll just keep kind of chipping away at the problems that we're identifying, and hopefully, I think you have the same issue in your neighborhood as well, and we're just slowly trying to attack as we are identifying. A lot of it's going to rely on DOT to come out and get work done, because it's not our roads, it's not our right-of-way. We don't have a lot of authority, so we are going to have to rely on them to resolve those issues. And they, a lot of the time, when we were looking at this, we did ask some very pointed questions to them. Do they come out and do inventories on their storm drains to see if they're collapsed? They really rely on residents to complain, if there's flooding issues. So if you guys see anything in your neighborhood, if you're a DOT street, just literally Google NCDOT report a problem, and it'll pull up a website that you can report those problems and flooding issues, because the more they're seeing it, the more they're going to come out. Unfortunately, we can't do anything because they're not our roads. So hopefully we'll get some traction, and hopefully this study will identify some of the problem areas and we can get some work done.
Christina, let me change gears real quick. Let's go back to the flooding issue, the creeks that are, our neighborhood is an example. We've got neighbors that suffer greatly from flooding. Water comes in up under the homes. And I know we're trying to get some portion of $36 million
Correct.
to mitigate the flooding in the creeks, and that's great. The question I've got is, what happens if we don't get any portion of that money?
Yeah,
And what do we do as a community to protect homeowners from flooding? Because it's getting worse with all the development that's taking place in Marvin and surrounding areas. The problem's not going to get less. So my question is what are we going to do moving forward to help our neighbors?
so that's a good question. If they're not currently in the FRIZ model to obtain that floodplain insurance, the maps are actually being reconsidered and redrawn right now, according to Terry Fox. I don't know how long that process takes, but if there are areas that are being flooded that weren't in the models before, hopefully they will be encompassed in the models that they're getting ready to put live after these studies are done, and hopefully they'll be able to obtain floodplain insurance at that point.
Is there going to be anything done to improve water flow within the creeks?
So we are very confident that we're going to receive some level of funding from this grant. And we're just going to have to wait and see what we do receive and what we can do with that funding. The two areas that we have identified where we're seeing most of the problems is the Marvin Branch and the 6 Mile Tributary. At least that's where we're receiving a lot of the complaints. So we would focus all of our efforts, with the money that we get on those two areas first, and then we would step out from there if we had funds available for the other areas. There's a lot of grant opportunities for this type of work, so we'll continue to fight for the community and apply for these grants as they become available with the limited resources that we have internally to do so. So, any other questions?
I do, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Okay. Oh, I have so much paper now. Okay. All right, so Christina Culp was going to talk about our light pollution mitigation discussion. She had some information on that. Unfortunately, she had an emergency that kept her from being with us this morning. And so in light of that, unless I hear any objections, we're going to table that for the next meeting. And so we will move on to a discussion of the tree ordinances, which
Yeah,
you had some concerns about.
yeah, I'd like to bring up lots happening in Marvin. A lot of new development, a lot of new homes, and a lot of us, and that's great. Development's wonderful, and so I'm not against development. But as I see our tree canopy being removed, I would like ordinances in Marvin to be strict enough that we do tree replacement at a greater rate than we're currently doing it. And that tree replacement should be done by the developers. And I'm hoping that we have that we can improve our ordinances. That when developers come in, and what happens currently, the new process is people clear cut property, they take the trees, they timber the trees, they strip the topsoil, they sell the topsoil. And what's left is just bare ground. It's happening all over Union County. So given that, and then a developer comes into a neighborhood and then they put one tree per house and you see the trees lined up along the sidewalks. That's what you see all over Union County. And I don't want to see that in Marvin. We moved to Marvin because of it's a beautiful, beautiful area. And I think it's incumbent upon our committee and council to maintain it to the degree we can maintain it. So given that, Hunter and I spoke briefly, and we talked about how can we improve our ordinances so that when developers come in and they build their homes, and that's great. We all love living here, and I'm glad to have new neighbors. But what I'm not happy with is, and I'm not going to name neighborhoods, but there are neighborhoods in Marvin that you can walk down the street and you just see a tree-lined street, but you walk the trails and you get behind people's homes, there's no trees. None, zero. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the heat index, there's the Union County, I don't know if y'all know or not, But the urban forester is a fellow by the name of Keith O'Haron, and he's got a presentation. It'll show you a heat index of Union County, and it'll show you the hottest spots. And the hottest spots, believe it or not, some of the hottest spots in this part of the county are in Marvin, which really surprised me. And it's the lack of trees. So, so as we proceed, I'd like our committee to think through about how can we ask the developer to put in more trees and the type of tree that best suits that environment. And I think it's an easy ask. I think we ought to ask, and it ought to be in our ordinance, and Hunter and I have talked about it. And I would just like the consideration of this committee to support an initiative that we go to Hunter or recommend to the council that as developers come in, no, 1 tree, 2 trees out front's not good enough for us. You're gonna put something else in the back. And we're gonna try to the best of our ability, to protect our tree canopy. And I would like to see Marvin take the leadership in Union County in terms of tree ordinance and how our community behaves, so that Weddington and Indian Trail and so on, Stallings, they follow our ordinance, and that we take a leadership role, and that we don't follow. So that's all I ask. So Hunter, it's up to you.
Yeah, so I was able to kind of talk with Bob on this, and a few things is that I believe most of you were on the board last year. Keith came and did his land analysis for us. Yes, even though we have some hot spots, the Village of Marvin has basically preserved and enhanced their tree canopy more than any other municipality in Union County in the last 20 years as well. So our current ordinance, Chapter 93, is our tree ordinance. In that chapter, we have basically tree removal, tree mitigation, all type of standards. The general rule of thumb is basically new development, they are encouraged to preserve. They have to have some type of, it's typically a 25-foot tree preservation strip around most neighborhoods. Depending on the neighborhood, it could be larger, it could be, some of the older ones don't even have them. With that being said, that is typically a certain amount of percentage of canopy trees that are being preserved. The individual lot basis when it comes to clearing and grading and so on, some neighborhoods, i.e. like the preserve, there were a couple heritage type trees that were preserved on the site during development, but for the most part, all other ones were pretty much, if there were trees, they were removed and then mitigated in some form or fashion. Mitigation comes in 2 factors, and one of those is that most subdivisions have a tree mitigation or tree planting area that's typically in common open space, and then 2, individual tree mitigation on an individual lot basis per se. So in larger scale developments, pretty much the amount of canopy trees removed is what they mitigate, or they pay a fee in lieu of the difference. I have talked with Keith on this multiple times. We've made a lot of revisions, and we have a lot of kind of plans in place. In our new ordinance, in the new MDO that's being considered, Article 11's our landscape, tree protection, and all that chapter, or article. It has been reviewed by Keith. His recommendations have been put in there. But once again, this does apply to typically new developments. And I think Bob and I kind of talked about this. Some of the issues that, and I've seen this that I run into, is that developers can follow the ordinance, mitigate, replant. But what I see is that in 3 to 5 years after a new homeowner comes in, they want to put a pool in. They want to do this, they want to do that. I cannot tell them they can't use their land for how they want it. I can only basically force them to mitigate what is removed. And so that's what you see. I mean, there's been some trees removed that, for an addition of a home or a pool and stuff. And so, yes, we are removing canopy, but at the same time, like, there are mitigation factors that they are replanting, that, because the goal is over time that we are enhancing that tree canopy in some form or fashion. And the second part of that is our tree planting list. It is a part of the ordinance, and so to update that requires text amendments. Keith and I, we're gonna...
Excuse me, requires what?
A text amendment. So it would require basically a 30 to 60 day process and approved by council. Keith wants to pull that and make it an administrative list, so basically we can update depending on the year, depending on what, species are thriving, and if, if there's any type of natural diseases in some that, so we can always have a high-quality type planting list and kind of pull out, and to your point, I think what you and I discussed is kind of pulling out some of the invasive or other stuff to make it more of a natural, enhance that environmental feel for the area. So that's all being done. The third thing that Keith and I talked about is, this is where HOAs really come into this. Our current tree chapter, because of Chapter 93, the way it was adopted, basically exempts properties prior to like 2005. Like if you're platted in your single-family residential lot and you're platted before 2005, technically by the rule of the law, you don't need a tree removal permit, which then means I can't force you to mitigate what you remove. When people call me, I always have them get one. I always encourage it, but once again, and for 99% of the time, people do plant back. But there has been instances where trees have been removed, but I can't take any action because they're exempt from that portion of the ordinance. With all that being said, that's where we're kind of creating a template to take to all the HOAs. That includes tree removal procedure, tree mitigation procedure, and kind of that planting list. Because, for example, in the courtyards at Marvin, their individual conditional zoning district, they had landscape plans, so they had their own type of tree plantings, but they're not great. And so I had a resident that wanted to remove a tree that was threatening her structure, so she was, allowed to. She did, then her question was mitigation, gave her the list, but then her neighborhood list it was more narrow, I guess, but it was more narrow in a way that those species weren't the best quality or the best fit for the area. And so that's where we're gonna try to create a program where we get to meet with these HOAs, have them try to incorporate this into their CCNRs and their ARC type, approval processes, and really kind of rely on them to be that extra, step to help us make sure that trees aren't being removed at will for no reason, no cause. And then if they are being removed, it's for a good reason and there's a mitigation behind it. So that's the only way the village can really, like Keith and I have talked about this, like we have to tie these tree removal permits and the mitigation to some type of zoning permit or development. And, anybody that comes in, I always try to say, hey, what's the purpose of this? Like, try to make sure they have a clear understanding of what they're doing. And, but yeah, that's where like the HOAs can be that extra step as well.
Hunter, back in like 2004 or so, I was part of a group that was originally kind of tasked with coming up with our original tree ordinance. And we were just a group of volunteers and kind of did it by pulling together bits and pieces of other municipalities and, things like that. Remind me when we kind of changed from that to the updated tree ordinance. And the other question I had, I know one of the intents, and you kind of mentioned that as well, is that originally we intended it, really to be just for subdivisions, so that, it wouldn't just be clear-cutting properties and so forth. And to some extent, to get in infrastructure, things like that, those are necessary, especially if you have, sewer and water and things like that. But when we talk about those hot spots and things like that, we'd always tried to also foster agricultural and equestrian type things. We have equestrian neighborhoods. And when you talk about hot spots, does the lack of a canopy, because, you have pastures for horses and things like that, even though you're providing open space and other natural benefits, does that contribute to the hot spots as well? Pasture land, because that's something that we've always tried to promote.
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look at that data from the land coverage analysis, as well as I could potentially ask Keith to potentially come back and present that information or data to you guys in the coming future. So I don't have that answer right now, but I can look into that for you. But But, you know, in regards to how, like, yes, like, Chapter 93 is our current tree chapter, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to be updated to be consistent with Article 11.
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue part of the reason why we're doing the MDO is because there were sections in this current Chapter 150, which is subdivisions, that reference Chapter 93, but it also contradicted Chapter 93. So it was like, what does apply? So we would still keep Chapter 93, kind of update it. That's where like our tree removal permit and some other kind of general standards are at. But then Article 11 is more, so what I'm trying to say is Chapter 93 is basically still the tree removal, tree mitigation authority that I can use after development happens, like after a subdivision is built or something like that. So individual type lot basis. Article 11 is the article for new development, as well as that would still fall under if somebody's, you know, wants to do an addition or some type of improvements onto their home or on their property. But so, like I said, some of the times trees are just removed without cause, and that's where we can get Chapter 93 updated to still be enforceable by that way. So, and Keith and I, like, we've been working on this for the last year and a half, 2 years, because the other thing that him and I have made a goal is we do want to obtain Tree City USA accreditation for the village, which we meet the criteria. The only thing is we have to have a public tree kind of subsection in that ordinance, and we already have that language drafted. And then the only thing, I think, if I recall what it entails, is basically we have to spend, I want to say it's like $1 for every 100 or 1,000 residents. I can't remember the proportional breakdown, but basically X amount of funds it's a formula based off the amount of residents and stuff you have in Marvin. You have to spend on tree protection and tree planting, and you have to plant X amount of trees on public property. And so that's where, you know, we've been talking about if we want to do the tree buffering and stuff for greenway trails and all that stuff, like there's ways we can utilize kind of a lot of different things to obtain, to meet that criteria for that Tree City USA accreditation. So all those plans are in the place, and that's something that we have been working on. He's been busy with things, I've been busy with some things, and so, but we talked about it at Marvin Day, and that's one of our plans to kind of get back on starting probably at the end of May, early June.
And so when we're talking about new subdivisions, right, as they come to us with a plan, right, at that point, there's going to be discussions about what tree mitigation will need to be taken place, right? Now then, during the actual build-out, right, they may have to run a sewer line, or they may, are there points at which additional requirements for additional tree mitigation or fee in lieu or something occur through the process past just the initial planning stage?
So in instances for new development where they have a tree preservation area, and it's intended to be undisturbed, and this happened in the cottages, for example, where a portion of that undisturbed buffer was cut into for, I believe it was either stormwater or sewer tie-in. I don't know how to explain it, but if you go out there, you can kind of see where some of that buffer was minorly disturbed. They then had to enhance that, so they planted back basically what was removed on top of, I want to say it's basically 25%, like it's 125% per se, back. But that's kind of that stipulation. So yes, when we review plans, we're looking at how many trees are removed. They have a tree mitigation plan which shows how many trees are being replanted and where. Then we review he's currently reviewing like the Heritage at Marvin one for that. Like, we know how many's removed. That site is very limited because of the smaller nature of the lots on how they're going to be planted back on site. So we're getting creative, and Keith's we've been working on that over the last couple months. But in the final be-all is that if all the trees cannot be replanted back on the original side of the development, either on individual lots or in those tree mitigation areas, that's when they pay a fee in lieu and or have the option to plant those trees on public property.
And when we, the PR&G board, has talked about fee in lieu before, typically there were some requirements that fee in lieu be used kind of in that general area. Is that the case with the tree one as well, or does the fact that it might be on public land broaden that? Does
So,
fee in lieu mean the same thing there as it does to PRG board?
in essence, yes. Like, it does, because whatever money we receive for tree mitigation needs to be used for tree mitigation. It shouldn't be used for something sideways. But the opportunities are not always going to be there to replant, maybe in that specific area. For the Heritage Project specifically, they do have like the Estates at Marvin Branch project where they could potentially request to plant some additional trees on that site, since it's still, a sister or brother development, if you want to say, of theirs, or they could provide the option to plant here at Village Hall, at the park, or we just request, it's kind of, that's where some of that recommendation comes in from PR&G on how we want to either use these funds, or what route should be taken for that additional mitigation if it can't be all met on site. And so, for the Heritage specifically, like over the next probably month or two, once I get the comments and everything back from Keith, like that will be potentially, I bring something to you guys to discuss, because once again, it's not going to be 100% possible for them to replant everything that was removed on that site back onto that site. Like, to make where those trees can thrive and grow and be healthy and kind of create a healthy environment. Like, but they do, like, they're going to be replanting back in the buffers. They have a tree mitigation area on their site, as well as they will be planting, I want to say it's 3 to 4 trees per lot. It's just those trees are not going to be, massive canopy, one, to start, but two, like, it might be 1 or 2 canopy trees and a few understory. Still where you're getting that landscaping, that greenery and stuff planted back, but there's still going to be an offset of canopy replacement that's going to have to either be done at another site or paid in fee in lieu portion.
So, Bob, I know you had a hard stop, and you gotta take off. Yeah, you are excused.
I need a motion to formally excuse him.
Do I hear a motion to formally excuse Bob? Who moves? Who moves first? You move. You second? All in favor? Aye. All right. So, thank you, Hunter, for the update on that. We'll be looking forward to hearing from Keith later, I think.
Yeah, and I guess just for clarification, do you want me to have Keith come? Because I know we have new members of the board. Jennifer, were you here last year when that was like one of your? Okay, but I can still have him come back and represent that information. I've got it if anybody's interested in it. But I believe it was like your last January or February meeting of last year.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I don't
Or it
remember
might
what
have
time
been
of year
20.
last year, but it was.
I knew we were in New Village Hall because we did it in the back room. Yeah.
Yeah, we did do it in the conference room because the AV was not up to running yet. So, yeah, it would probably be helpful. Let's figure out, it's not a super critical thing, so let's figure out a good date in the future to do that, maybe in conjunction with, any revisions that are coming up. Like, for example, you were talking about, moving the species list to an administrative list. So maybe in conjunction with that, if we have any recommendations on species that should be on there, or at least to hear Keith talk about species that should be on there for our edification, maybe in conjunction with that, it would make sense, which I think is kind of down the road. I know the MDO is kind of taking up everything else right at the moment. So, yeah, let's address that in the future, but not urgently. Okay, so that's all the unfinished business items, because I know somebody else has a hard stop today, so let's keep moving. Austin, we have no new business, correct? That is correct, all right, cool. And a review of action items. Do we have anybody assigned action items today?
Just that Hunter's going to move forward with that presentation from Keith, and that Christina will be giving another update on the STRAP grant in the coming months. And you can skip the ongoing action item list because that list is empty right now.
That list is empty. Yeah, hey, we like that. All right. So before we adjourn, does anybody have any additional comments today? Nope? All right, ladies. All right, fantastic. So then do I hear a motion to, do we have to move to adjourn? My brain just suddenly went
You have to-
blank.
Yes.
That's hilarious. Okay, so do I hear a motion to adjourn this Parks Rec and Greenway Board meeting on Tuesday, May 7th at 10:20 a.m.? Do I hear a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, unanimous. Let's go.